scream ripped through the air of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, slicing a sharp, chilling line across the familiar noise of Terminal B. "Please, someone help! My mom won't wake up!" Nathan Hale heard that trembling voice before he ever saw the child it belonged to. He was still standing, frozen by the glass, watching his private jet pull away from the gate, gliding slowly along the rain-slick runway, before disappearing into the heavy gray sky. With his private jet grounded for emergency maintenance, he had been forced to book a commercial seat, only for a conference call to stretch an extra 20 minutes. 20 minutes that made him miss his business flight to New York. 20 minutes that now felt like a deliberate intervention from fate itself. The little girl could not have been older than 6. Her natural curls bounced wildly with every desperate step, tears streaming down her small brown cheeks. She ran straight toward him, her tiny feet slipping slightly from the urgency, her small hands reaching out in utter desperation. "Sir, please help me." Nathan instinctively crouched down, his eyes locking instantly with the child's panicked gaze. Her hair was damp with mist, her shoulders trembling, her breath coming in sharp, broken bursts. Just one look and he knew she was terrified in a way no child should ever have to be. Behind her, only a few dozen steps away, a woman lay motionless beside a row of boarding area seats. Her arm was stretched out as if she had tried to shield her daughter before collapsing. Around them, people stood watching, uncertain, frozen in their own helplessness. Nathan shot to his feet, a cold shock running down his spine. He no longer thought about the missed flight, the postponed meeting, the suit wrinkled from a long, exhausting morning. All he saw was a child pleading for help and a mother who did not move. "Take me to your mom," he said, his voice dropping into a calm steadiness he did not even know he possessed. The girl gripped his hand tightly, her small fingers trembling so hard it made his chest tighten. They hurried across the waiting area, their footsteps mirrored on the glossy floor, the overhead announcements echoing faintly as if pushed out of the private world forming around just the 3 of them. The woman lay on her side, her face pale, her long hair spilling across her cheek. Nathan knelt, pressing 2 fingers to her neck to check her pulse, his hand steady with the instinct of a man who rarely allowed emotion to interfere with work, yet now filled with a tension he could not mask. The little girl choked out, "My mom isn't breathing. She won't wake up." Nathan quickly dialed emergency services, his voice low and firm, powerful enough to still the noise around them. "Unresponsive female at Terminal B. No reaction. Minor child. Present. Send medical personnel immediately." When he lowered the phone, he saw the girl kneeling by her mother, her tiny hand resting on the woman's hand, tears dripping onto the cold skin as if begging for a miracle. In that moment, amid the flight announcements, the rushing passengers, the smell of coffee and lingering rain in the air, Nathan understood that those 20 minutes that made him miss his plane were not a mistake. They were the beginning of something he could not yet name. He only knew one thing: he would not leave. Not when this child held on to him as if he were the last surviving thread of hope in her world. If you are hearing this now and feel something stirring in your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like, and share this video so we can keep bringing meaningful stories to you every day. And if you don't mind, could you tell me where you're watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know which corner of the world this story has reached. We genuinely cherish every message you share. Medical staff arrived only a few minutes after Nathan called, but to Mia, every second stretched into an eternity. She clung to his hand so tightly her small fingers turned icy. As the technicians knelt to examine the woman, Nathan stood behind Mia, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, trying to offer the fragile reassurance he knew she was clinging to. They fitted a breathing mask over Aria's face, checked her pupil response, applied pain stimuli, but she did not react. One of the medics murmured into his radio words Mia could not hear, but Nathan heard clearly: dangerously low blood pressure, suspected severe exhaustion. When they lifted Aria onto the stretcher, Mia burst into uncontrollable sobs, chasing after them and clinging to her mother's hand, and Nathan had to scoop her into his arms before she collapsed in panic. Her small body shook violently as she kicked and cried, "Sir, they're taking my mom. She won't open her eyes." Nathan held her close against his chest, his voice deeper and steadier than he felt, even as urgency pounded through him. "Mia, I'm here. We're going with her. No one is leaving your mom behind." She pressed her face into his suit jacket, her tears soaking through the fabric with each broken sob. People glanced their way, some pausing, others whispering, but Nathan paid them no mind. He followed the stretcher with long, determined strides, holding Mia as if loosening his grip even a little would let her entire world fall apart. When they reached the ambulance bay and the back doors swung open, the pale white light fell across Arya's still face. A medic looked at Nathan and asked if he was family. Nathan hesitated for a heartbeat, his eyelids heavy, then looked at the little girl clinging to him. "I'm going with her," he said. "And the child, she cannot stay here alone." Inside the cramped ambulance, the monitor beeped in weak, uneven rhythms. Mia released Nathan's collar just enough to grasp her mother's hand, her small palm resting over the woman's cold fingers, as if trying to warm them back to life. Mom, please wake up." Nathan sat close beside her, one arm wrapped firmly around Mia to keep her steady as the vehicle jolted forward. He looked at the woman on the stretcher, her face thin, dark circles under her eyes, the look of someone who had carried far more weight than a body was meant to bear. No one needed to guess to know she had pushed herself too far for someone she loved. When the ambulance stopped at the Harborview emergency entrance, a trauma team rushed out to take over. They pulled Mia back from the stretcher to wheel Arya inside, and this time the child nearly broke down completely. "No, I want to go with my mom." Nathan immediately scooped her up again, holding her tightly until she stopped struggling. "Mia, listen to me," he said gently but firmly. "The doctors need to help your mom first. If you run after her, you'll slow them down. And your mom needs them to be fast. Very fast." Mia went silent, her lips trembling, her eyes wide and wet, clinging to each word as if they were her lifeline. When the doctors pushed the stretcher through the white doors, Mia buried her face in Nathan's chest once more, her small frame shaking uncontrollably. Nathan carried her to a plastic chair in the waiting room, his breath sinking under the weight of her quiet despair. He was not familiar with children, and he was even less familiar with being someone a child depended on so completely. But he knew that from the moment she ran to him in the airport, everything had shifted. Not because he wanted it, but because he could not do anything else. Mia looked up at him, her eyes raw and red. "Sir, my mom will wake up, right?" Nathan looked into those eyes, feeling them cut straight into a place inside him he had believed was sealed shut long ago. "We're going to wait," he said slowly. "And no matter what happens, I'll be right here with you." And for the first time in his life, Nathan Hale realized that the fear tightening in his chest did not come from what lay behind those emergency room doors. It came from how terrified he was of the moment this child might let go of his hand. Time in the emergency room waiting area moved so slowly that every minute seemed to stretch into a thick, heavy strand of time pressing down on the air already tense enough to suffocate. Mia curled up in Nathan's lap, her head resting against his chest, her hands clutching the edge of his suit jacket, as if letting go even a little would cause everything to disappear. Nathan kept his hand on her back, his touch gentle and unconscious, his eyes fixed on the doors of the trauma room where Arya had been taken. He had witnessed scenes like this countless times during the years he spent facing violence and loss in the underworld, but it had never felt like this, had never made his throat tighten with helplessness as he watched a child endure something that even grown adults could barely bear. A nurse stepped out to tell them they were checking Arya's neurological response and needed more tests. Mia jolted, her small hand squeezing Nathan's wrist. He leaned down, touching his forehead lightly to the soft curls at the top of her head, feeling the trembling she was struggling to suppress. "You're doing so well," he whispered, his voice low and steady in a way that surprised even him. "We're just going to wait a little longer." Mia did not answer, only gave the faintest nod, but her tiny breaths rose and fell with exhaustion and fear. Nathan set her gently on the seat beside him, slipped off his jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. His cologne lingered in the air, carrying with it a warmth both unfamiliar and safe, allowing Mia to relax slightly, her small hands gripping the lapel of the coat as if it were the only good luck charm she had left. A while later, a middle-aged doctor stepped out, removed his mask, looked around, and then focused on Nathan, perhaps because he was the only one protecting the child. "Are you family?" Nathan paused, not yet knowing how to answer. When Mia slowly stood up, her eyes red and swollen, but trying desperately to stay composed. "She's my mom," the girl said, her voice hoarse and thin as though a breath of wind might carry it away. "How is she?" The doctor regarded the child for a moment, then turned to Nathan as if waiting for confirmation. Nathan nodded, heavy but certain. "I'm looking after both of them." The doctor exhaled and gestured for them to sit. "Her name is Arya, correct?" Mia nodded hard. "We're doing everything we can to stabilize her. She has been severely exhausted for a long time, dehydrated, with critically low blood pressure and signs of acute stress. Those things make the body shut down much faster than normal." Mia hiccuped, tears falling again, though she tried to swallow them to listen. Nathan's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, as if supporting both of them at once. "Is she breathing again?" Mia asked, each word sounding as though it were breaking apart. "Yes," the doctor replied, "but she is still unconscious. We need a few more hours to see how she responds to treatment." Nathan drew a deep breath, the sharpness in his eyes softening into a shadowed mix of worry and resolve. "How long before we can see her?" "When she becomes more stable. For now." The doctor crouched slightly so he could speak to Mia with a gentleness rarely seen in a crowded hospital. "You need to rest a little. You've been very brave." Mia lowered her head, biting her lip, afraid that if she opened her mouth, she would start crying again. When the doctor walked away, Nathan sat down and pulled her close. "Mia," he murmured, "you don't have to be brave in front of me. It's all right to cry." And as if those words unlocked a door she had been holding shut for hours, Mia collapsed into him, weeping harder than she ever had. Nathan placed his hand on her back, rubbing gently, holding her firmly, letting the small broken sobs strike deep into a place he had not touched in years. He did not know what waited behind the door of that hospital room, nor did he know where fate intended to pull him next, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity: he would not leave this place. He would not leave this child, no matter what happened. Mia eventually fell asleep on his shoulder after nearly an hour of crying herself into exhaustion, her breaths becoming steadier but still trembling as though she might start sobbing again at the slightest nudge. Nathan adjusted his jacket around her, lifting the collar to cover the small shoulder that shivered from cold and fatigue. Looking down at her tiny face tucked into his chest, he felt something strange blooming inside him, a feeling both tender and painfully tight, squeezing his chest every time Mia shifted or tightened her grip on his suit. The familiar sounds of the hospital echoed around them, the footsteps of nurses, the beeps of heart monitors from the trauma rooms, the distant announcements calling for doctors. But within that noisy world, Nathan heard only the faint breaths of the small child leaning against him. He had seen brutal tragedy in the underworld, sudden deaths, losses without warning, but none of it had ever made his throat close the way it did now, as he held a 6-year-old girl trying to borrow even a sliver of peace from the arms of a stranger. A nurse brought 2 cups of water, setting them down gently and giving Nathan a cautious look. "If you're the one caring for her, you should drink something." "The boy, the girl, she trusts you a lot." Nathan nodded faintly in thanks. Once she left, he took a small sip, the dryness in his throat stinging, though he could not tell if it came from tiredness, worry, or the quiet storm that had been building inside him from the moment he met Mia at the airport. About half an hour later, the doctor returned, his expression a bit lighter this time. Nathan straightened, keeping one arm securely around Mia so she would not startle awake. "She's more stable now," the doctor said, "though she's still unconscious. We believe she will need a few more hours of monitoring, but you may take the girl to see her mother for a few minutes, as long as you keep things calm." Nathan looked down at Mia sleeping heavily, her lashes still damp with tears. He did not want to wake her, but he knew she would not forgive herself if she missed the chance to see her mother. He gently nudged her awake, his voice soft and oddly tender. "Mia, sweetheart, wake up. You can see your mom for a little while." Her eyes opened slowly, still wet, her face slack with exhaustion, but the moment she heard the word mom, she sat up quickly, her entire body trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. Nathan held her hand and led her into the recovery room. Arya lay on the bed, her face pale but her breathing steadier. The tubes and monitors surrounding her made Mia hesitate, but then she stepped forward, her small hand trembling as she placed it over her mother's. "Mom, can you hear me?" Her voice was barely more than a breath. Nathan stood behind her, watching in silence, and in that moment something inside him felt stripped bare. Arya did not open her eyes, but her chest rose slightly, as if responding to her daughter's voice, and that was enough for Mia to cry again, this time softly, as though a tiny flame of hope had finally been lit after hours of darkness. "You're all right," Nathan whispered, resting a hand on her small shoulder. "Your mom is fighting, and you have been so brave." Mia turned toward him, tears still falling, but the corners of her mouth trembling into the faintest smile. "Sir, please don't leave." The words struck Nathan harder than any blade he had ever taken. He bent down, meeting her tear-filled eyes directly. "I'll be here," he said, his voice deep as a vow, "for as long as you need me." And in that moment, Nathan Hale understood that this was no longer simply helping a child in a moment of crisis. It was the beginning of something that would change the course of his life forever. Nathan stood in the recovery room for a long time, his eyes following every rise and fall of Arya's chest and every tiny movement in Mia's hand as it clung to her mother's. No one spoke, yet the silence pressed heavier than any words of reassurance he might have been able to offer. A nurse came in to check the monitors and gently reminded them that the patient needed rest. Nathan laid a light hand on Mia's shoulder to signal it was time to leave. As the door closed behind them, Mia kept looking back, her eyes weighed down with such worry that Nathan felt an invisible bond tightening around him, one he could not bring himself to break. He carried Mia back to the waiting area, set her on the chair, and sat down beside her. "Sir," Mia whispered, her voice thin as a thread, "my mom is going to wake up, right?" Nathan neither lied nor dodged the question. He leaned closer and answered with the calm, steady tone he used whenever he needed to anchor someone. "We're going to stay here until your mom wakes up. You are not alone." Mia gave a small nod, but the fear was still there, lingering in every breath she took. After a while, a nurse returned with some forms. "We need a family contact to complete the admission papers." She did not have a wallet or any identification on her. "Do you know anyone we can call?" Nathan froze for a moment. He looked down at Mia, knowing that the only possible answer lay in a 6-year-old child trembling like a leaf in winter. "Mia," he asked softly, "does your mom have anyone we can call? Family, friends?" Mia lowered her head, her small shoulders drawing inward. I do not know. My mom only has me." Nathan did not understand why his chest tightened so sharply at those words. He turned to the nurse. "Put my name down for now. I will take care of the expenses." The nurse looked surprised, but when she saw how tightly Mia clung to his hand, she nodded her thanks and walked away. When they were alone again, Nathan turned back to the little girl. "Mia, are you hungry? We have been here all day." Mia shook her head immediately, as if the thought of leaving her seat meant her mother would vanish forever. Nathan did not press her. Instead, he pulled his chair closer so she could lean against his shoulder. Outside, the rain began to fall. The glass of the waiting room, reflecting long streaks of water like threads, tying together the hearts of two strangers who were slowly being bound to each other in a way no one could have predicted. A few hours later, as the hospital lights dimmed and shifted into the night shift, a security officer appeared and walked toward them. "Excuse me," he said. "We got a report about a missing child from the airport. Is this the girl?" "We need to file a report." Mia immediately pressed closer to Nathan, her eyes wide with panic, and Nathan's arm instinctively tightened around her. "She is not missing," Nathan replied, his voice lower and sharper than usual. "I have been with her since her mother collapsed at the airport. I called emergency services and came here with them. I have signed all the necessary forms with the hospital." The officer looked at Mia, then at the way she clung to Nathan, as if he were the only solid ground she had left. His posture softened, and he raised his radio to update the situation, before nodding to Nathan. "Thank you for helping them. I will update the file. If we need further confirmation, the hospital will contact you." When he left, Nathan could feel Mia's breaths shivering against his shirt. He lowered his hand to her curls, gently stroking the soft hair. "No one is taking you away," he said quietly. "I am right here." Mia drew in a deep breath, her tiny voice spilling out like a prayer. Mia looked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep but filled with a lingering fear that he might vanish. She didn't speak, but her small hand tightened around his finger, a silent question hanging in the air. Nathan didn't say a word. He simply removed his suit jacket and tucked it gently around her shoulders, engulfing her small frame in his warmth. He shifted his position, angling his body to shield her from the cold lights of the hallway. It was an unspoken vow, louder than any words. Feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, Mia finally let her eyes close, her grip on his hand never loosening as she drifted back to sleep. In that moment, Nathan Hale understood he was no longer just a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He had become the person this little girl had chosen to trust completely, and he would not let that trust fall to the ground. Night at Harborview Hospital stretched longer than any night Nathan had ever known. Mia fell asleep on his shoulder for the second time, her small body limp with fatigue, her hands still instinctively gripping his jacket, as if letting go would make everything shatter. Nathan shifted carefully to make her more comfortable, then leaned back against the cold plastic chair, his gaze fixed on the doors leading to the recovery area. Anyone passing by would easily assume he was the child's father, or at least some close relative. But the truth was stranger. Only a few short hours earlier, they had been complete strangers. A nurse walking past stopped when she saw Mia asleep in his arms. "Would you like me to bring her a blanket?" Nathan nodded slightly, and soon she returned with a thin, light blue blanket. He tucked it around Mia with care, pulling it up to her neck and smoothing her curls, as though soothing away any nightmare still lurking in her sleep. Looking down at her small face, Nathan felt his chest clench, not from the weariness of the long day, but from something deeper, like an old memory being stirred awake. He had seen children cry before, had witnessed loss, had held lost kids after violent clashes in the underworld, but no child had ever made him feel this fierce need to protect. It was not just responsibility. It was some long-buried instinct he had believed was gone. Around midnight, the doctor came out from the recovery unit. Nathan straightened immediately, one arm still wrapped securely around Mia so she would not be startled awake. "How is she?" he asked at once. The doctor pulled a chair over and sat down, his tone dropping. "We have done the necessary tests. There is no brain damage, which is good, but she is dangerously exhausted. Both her body and nervous system have been pushed too hard for too long. If no one had found her in time..." He let the sentence trail off, but Nathan understood. He looked down at the sleeping child in his arms, a restless ache spreading through his chest. "How long until she wakes up?" "It could be a few hours. It could be morning. Once her body recovers enough, she will wake on her own." Nathan nodded, his hand tightening slightly on Mia's shoulder. "I will wait." The doctor studied them for a long moment, then asked with a rare hint of hesitation, "You truly are not related to them?" Nathan shook his head slightly. "No, but from the moment this little girl ran to me at the airport, I could not walk away." The doctor gave a small nod, something thoughtful flickering in his eyes, then left. Nathan leaned back once more, trying to relax, but his thoughts kept circling the image of Arya lying unconscious and Mia panicking. He wondered what they had been through, how they had lived, to end up like this, mother and daughter, wandering alone with no documents, no contacts, no family. The question struck a familiar chord deep inside him. He knew all too well what it meant to live with no one to lean on. Mia shifted against him, rubbing her face into his chest and exhaling a small, searching breath, as if looking for warmth. Nathan's hand moved automatically to her back, stroking gently until her breathing steadied again. Outside, the rain grew heavier, each drop hitting the awning like slow, sorrowful footsteps. The entire waiting area was washed in a soft yellow light that made everything feel unnaturally still. For the first time in many years, Nathan felt his mind wander away from deals, battles, and grudges in the shadows. There was only a mother and daughter sleeping on opposite sides of a single door, and a promise he had spoken without thinking, yet did not regret at all. Around 3 a.m, Mia stirred, blinking against the light. She lifted her head to look at Nathan, her eyes still swollen, and her voice thick with sleep. "Sir, is my mom awake yet?" Nathan laid a hand on her head, his voice so gentle it seemed meant only for her. "Not yet, but you can see her again when they let you in." "We are still here." Mia rested her head back on his shoulder and let out a tiny sigh, so small yet so heavy that Nathan felt his heart go quiet for a moment. "Please don't go anywhere." Nathan's arm tightened slightly around her, his gaze fixed on the recovery unit with a quiet, unwavering resolve. "I am not going anywhere, Mia. As long as you want me to stay, I will be here." And in that deep, fragile silence, Nathan Hale knew he had stepped into the story of this mother and daughter in a way that left him no way back. Mia woke fully before dawn, her small eyes still red but clearer, as though the short sleep in Nathan's arms had returned a bit of strength to her tiny body. She sat up and took his hand, her little fingers curling around his as if she feared that loosening her grip for even a single heartbeat would cause the world to fall apart again. "Sir, can we go see my mom now?" Nathan checked his watch, the minute hand crawling forward, the sky outside still dense with darkness, the rain having stopped but the pavement glowing faintly under the reflections of streetlights. He leaned down to smooth Mia's hair. "Let me ask the nurse." He stood and walked to the front desk, and even then Mia watched every step he took, her gaze clinging to him in a way that reached somewhere deep in Nathan's chest, somewhere he had not expected to feel touched. A few minutes later he returned, and Mia immediately leaned toward him as if she had been waiting for hours. "We can go in," Nathan said, his voice noticeably softer. Mia tightened her hold on his hand, her little legs moving so fast that Nathan had to lengthen his stride to keep up. When they entered the recovery room, the light was soft and pale, the steady rhythm of the heart, monitor filling the space. Arya still lay there, fragile and faint, but her breathing was stronger now, a hint of color returning to her cheeks. Mia approached the bed, her whole body trembling with emotion, and placed her tiny hand on her mother's. "Mom, I'm here. I'm here with Sir Nathan." Nathan stood behind her, quiet and watchful, his eyes tracking every small movement between mother and daughter. For a brief moment, so slight it could have been imagined, he saw Arya's chest lift a bit more, as if responding to her daughter's voice. Mia froze, hope widening her eyes. "Mom, you heard me, didn't you?" Nathan stepped closer, placing a hand on Mia's back as though to steady her, in case her emotions overwhelmed her. He looked closely at Arya's face and saw the faintest flicker beneath her eyelids. Once, then again, softer. Mia gasped, her little heart seeming ready to burst. And then Arya's eyes opened, slowly, heavily but truly open. "Mom." Mia's voice cracked wide open, no longer a call but a release. Nathan stepped back, giving them space, though he could not pull his gaze away. Arya struggled to focus, and the first thing she saw was her daughter's face tear-streaked, yet shining like sunlight after a storm. "Mia," Arya breathed, her voice so faint it might have been a whisper of wind, but to Mia it was everything. The little girl folded her hands around her mother's and pressed her face into them, sobbing in relief, as though the entire night's fear had collapsed into that single moment. Nathan stood still behind them, his arms at his sides, but his chest full of a warm ache he could not quite name. After Arya's breathing steadied, Mia turned to find Nathan again, as if needing to confirm he was still there. When their eyes met, Nathan stepped forward and bent slightly. Arya looked at him, her brows knitting in confusion or perhaps fatigue. "You are?" she rasped. Nathan answered in a low, steady voice that seemed to fill the quiet room. "I am Nathan Hale. Your daughter ran to me for help at the airport. I came here with both of you." Arya closed her eyes for a moment, gathering the scattered fragments of memory. "Thank you. Thank you for helping her. Thank you." Nathan shook his head, but Mia jumped in before he could reply. "Mom, he stayed with me all night. He didn't go anywhere." Arya turned her tired, clear eyes toward Nathan. I don't know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Nathan replied, his voice calm yet oddly firm. "What matters is that you're safe." A nurse entered to check Arya's vitals, her tone gentle but firm. "The patient needs rest. You may stay for a few more minutes." Nathan nodded and stepped back, but Mia remained at her mother's side, gripping her hand tightly. Arya glanced from her daughter to Nathan, something like gratitude mixed with bewilderment passing through her expression. "You took care of her?" "I did what needed to be done," Nathan answered, though the look in his eyes said something far more complicated. He had not merely helped, he had stayed. He had kept his word. Mia turned toward him again, her eyes tired yet bright. "Will you stay again?" Nathan looked at the child for a long moment, feeling the vow from the night before resting on his tongue. "If you want me to stay," he said quietly, "I will stay." The tiny smile that curved on Mia's lips was the first glimmer of light in the recovery room in many long hours. In that instant, Nathan knew the invisible line between stranger and anchor had dissolved completely. He had stepped into their lives more deeply than he had ever intended. Arya tried to keep her eyes open a bit longer, but exhaustion quickly pulled her back into a heavy sleep. Before drifting off, she looked at Mia one last time, as if reminding herself that her daughter was safe, still right there beside her. When Arya slipped back into rest, Mia continued holding her hand, her small fingers gripping as though the moment she let go, the fear of being left again would flood back in full force. Nathan stood behind her, watching with a quiet tension that he barely understood, feeling something delicate shift inside his chest, something gentle yet dangerous in its own way, as if taking a step closer would mean crossing a point from which there was no return. When the nurse returned to adjust the IV and note the readings, Nathan gently bent down and lifted Mia into his arms. She startled, her first instinct to latch onto her mother's hand, but Nathan leaned close and murmured in her ear, his voice a warm rumble that calmed her instantly. "Your mom needs to sleep a bit. We'll sit right outside, all right? I'll bring you back in the moment she wakes." Mia hesitated a moment, then nodded, her tear-glazed eyes reluctantly letting go of her mother's fingers. Nathan carried her out of the recovery room and found a quiet seat in the corner of the waiting area. Mia clung to him, her head resting on his shoulder, her breath still trembling as if she had not yet learned how to be away from her mother even for a few minutes. "Sir, she's not going to sleep forever, right?" Mia asked, her voice fragile as a filament of thread. Nathan placed a soft hand on her back, stroking gently to give her a sliver of peace. "No, she's just tired. Her body needs rest, the same way you fell asleep after crying so much." Mia tightened the light blue blanket around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the recovery room door. "Do you think my mom was scared?" The question took Nathan by surprise, leaving him still for a beat. He did not want a child to think about fear in the harsh way adults did, but Mia had already grown in ways no child should be forced to. "Your mom is very strong," Nathan said, tilting his head to see her better. "But even strong people get scared sometimes. What matters is that she's fighting her way back to you." Mia sank deeper into his shoulder, her hands gripping his shirt. "I'm so scared. I'm scared she'll go away like... Her voice trembled and faded, barely audible. Nathan wrapped both arms around her, holding her close as if shielding her from the entire world. He did not know what she had been through, did not know why mother and daughter were wandering to the point of collapsing in the middle of an airport, but he knew the memories behind those unfinished words were not simple. "Mia," he said softly, "your mom is not leaving you. I promise you this. I will not let that happen." Mia pressed her face into his chest, her small sobs rising again, but this time they carried sadness, not terror, as if she had finally found a safe place to let it spill out. After she calmed and nestled quietly in Nathan's lap, another doctor approached. "Mr. Hale?" Nathan lifted his gaze, instinctively sharper, though his hand stayed steady on Mia's back. "We need to discuss a few details about the patient," the doctor said, professional but cautious. "You're listed as a non-relative." Mia immediately tightened her grip on Nathan's hand, as if afraid someone might pull him away. Nathan placed his other hand gently on her head to reassure her. "That's correct," he answered slowly, "but I have been the only one caring for them since Arya collapsed. I will stay responsible until she wakes." The doctor looked at Mia for a brief moment before turning back to Nathan. "We're not questioning your intentions, just confirming. When Arya wakes, we will need to speak with both of you." "I'll be here," Nathan said firmly. When the doctor left, Nathan simply placed a hand on Mia's head. He didn't need to say a word. His steady presence was the only answer she needed. And for the first time since meeting him, Mia smiled a small, weary smile. But enough to tell Nathan that the trust she placed in him was growing little by little, like a young sprout pushing its way toward the light after a long stretch of darkness. Morning crept into the waiting room in a wash of Seattle's pale gray light, reflecting off the rows of cold metal chairs. Nathan remained seated there, his back against the wall, while Mia slept curled in his lap like a small kitten worn out after a storm. His jacket covered her completely, her tiny face tucked against his chest in search of warmth, and her little hand somewhere in the long night had loosened, no longer gripping him in fear. Nathan adjusted the blanket around her and gently stroked her soft curls when he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up. It was the night shift nurse, now transitioning into the morning shift, her expression far lighter than the night before. "Mr. Hale, the patient, Arya, is fully awake now," she said softly so she would not wake Mia. "She's still weak, but responding well. She wants to see her daughter." Mia stirred the moment she heard the word, "Mom," as if her senses needed only the faintest hint of anything related to her mother to come alive. Her eyes opened only halfway, but they brightened with the fragile hope she had been holding on to through the long hours of darkness. "Mom is awake?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Nathan nodded, his hand settling on her small shoulder. "She's awake. Let's go see her." Mia jumped up so quickly she nearly toppled off the chair, and Nathan had to steady her. She immediately grabbed his hand and tugged hard, as if running alone might somehow cause her to lose him. Nathan let Mia lead, lengthening his stride to match her quick steps along the softly lit hallway. When they reached the recovery room, Mia let go of Nathan's hand and ran ahead, only to stop short at the side of the bed. Arya lay there, her face tired but her eyes fully open, filled with emotion when she saw her daughter trembling in front of her. "Mia," Arya breathed, her voice weak but far clearer than before. Mia threw herself into her mother's arms, her small arms winding around that frail body with every ounce of strength she had. Arya held her tight, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I am so sorry. I scared you." Mia shook her head over and over, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. "It's okay. You're awake now. That's all that matters." Nathan stood behind them, quietly watching, like someone guarding the doorway of their reunion. Though he said nothing, his eyes carried a relief he had not allowed himself to feel all night. After a while, Arya looked up at him. Her eyes held gratitude, confusion, and a trace of disbelief at the fact that he was still there steadfast, unchanged from the moment Mia had run to him at the airport. "Thank you." Her voice trembled with emotion. "If it weren't for you, I do not know what would have happened to Mia." Nathan stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "I just did what anyone should do. She was terrified. I couldn't leave her." Arya placed a hand on Mia's head as if to reassure herself that her daughter was indeed still beside her. "All night? You stayed here?" Nathan did not answer immediately. He looked at Mia, then at Arya again. "I promised her I wouldn't go anywhere." Arya held his gaze for a long moment, as if trying to understand a man who had stepped into their lives in a way no one could have predicted. In her eyes, Nathan saw exhaustion, gratitude, and the wary caution of someone who had been stretched thin by months of silent struggle. Arya looked at him, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "You stayed all night? We have troubled you enough." Nathan didn't let her finish. He poured a cup of water and placed it gently in her hand, his gaze locking onto hers with absolute clarity. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. "Not until I know both of you are safe." The tone of his voice brooked no argument. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Arya looked from his determined face to Mia, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. The protest died on her lips. She simply nodded, accepting the shield he was offering. "Mia can't be on her own, and you're not strong enough yet." Arya bit her lip, her long lashes trembling. She was someone used to enduring everything alone, used to pushing through without asking for help from anyone. But that morning, seeing Mia clinging to Nathan, seeing his patience and quiet steadiness, she understood she no longer had the strength to refuse. "Then, if you don't mind," she said, her voice so soft it nearly dissolved into the air. "Thank you." Nathan didn't smile, but something gentle passed through his eyes, serving as an answer in place of a smile. At that moment, Mia wrapped her arms around him, as if that single acknowledgement from her mother had finally settled her tiny heart. And when Nathan tightened his hand on her shoulder, he knew he had taken another step deeper into the story of this mother and daughter, a step he had no desire to undo. Nathan stood still for a moment, watching the two of them holding each other on the hospital bed, his eyes filled with both relief and heaviness. Arya was awake, but the exhaustion etched into her face made it clear that her body had only just escaped something dangerous. Her hair was tangled from lying too long, her lips pale, her thin hand gripping her daughter's as if it were the final anchor in a world she was still fighting her way back into. As Mia clung to her mother, Arya looked toward Nathan, her eyes holding a deep gratitude mixed with the uncertainty of not knowing where to begin. "You stayed all night," she said softly, her voice weak but sincere. I didn't think I could rely on anyone in a moment like this. But you stayed." Nathan leaned slightly against the edge of the bed, his arms crossed though his voice softened. "Not because you were relying on me," he said slowly, "but because Mia needed someone. And I realized I couldn't walk away." Hearing her name, Mia immediately latched onto Nathan's arm again, as if afraid he might reconsider. Arya watched that instinctive reaction, her eyes flickering. She knew too well that Mia did not trust easily, did not cling easily, least of all to a stranger. The way her daughter held on to Nathan told her he had been there in the darkest hours of her little girl's life. "I don't know where the two of you were headed before the airport," Nathan continued, his voice low and steady. "But you collapsed without warning, without documents, without anyone to contact. I think whatever you two went through wasn't simple." Arya lowered her gaze, her eyes dimming as old burdens resurfaced. "We were just trying to find a new place to start," she said quietly, her hand brushing Mia's hair in a protective reflex. "I didn't think my body would react like this. I thought I could handle it." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, part of him wanting to ask more. But the instincts he'd honed, instincts that had saved his life countless times, told him Arya didn't need to be questioned right now. She needed breath. She needed strength. She needed to feel safe before she could open any door to the past. A nurse entered, checking the equipment and pulling them from their thoughts. Mia stepped aside just enough to make room, though she still held her mother's hand tightly. When the nurse left, Arya inhaled deeply and tried to push herself upright, but Nathan immediately reached out to steady her. "Slowly," he reminded her, his voice low but edged with concern. "You only woke a few hours ago." Arya looked up at him, her eyes darkening briefly with fatigue. "I just want Mia to see I'm okay." Nathan glanced at Mia, watching her mother's every movement. In the child's eyes were both fragile hope and a fear that refused to let go. "Trust me," Nathan said, bending to meet Mia's gaze. "Your mom will get better, but we have to let her rest." Mia nodded, but she still did not release her mother's hand. Nathan turned back to Arya, his tone softening even further. "If you don't have anyone in Seattle, I can help arrange a few things. When you're discharged, you won't be able to take care of Mia on your own." Arya froze, surprised by how deeply his words struck. I really don't want to impose." Nathan gently cut her off. "You're not imposing. I'm not walking away while you two still need help. We'll talk more when you're stronger." Arya studied him for a long moment, as if trying to understand what kind of man he was, why a complete stranger would be so patient, so protective, so constant. But she no longer had the strength to resist or question. She only knew that had Nathan not been there last night, Mia might have endured the worst fear a child could face. "If you truly want to help," Arya whispered, "then thank you." Mia immediately leaned into Nathan again, as if her mother's soft acceptance brought peace to her tiny heart. Nathan rested a hand on her head, a warm, grounding feeling swelling in his chest. "We'll take care of everything," he said, his voice steadier than any promise he had made before. "All three of us." And right then, in that cold white hospital room, none of them said it out loud, but all felt it deeply. The chance encounter at the airport was no longer an accident or coincidence. It had become the thread binding three lives together in a way none of them could stop and none of them were ready to let go. Midday light slipped through the hospital window, casting a thin, muted glow across Arya's face, softening her pallor but giving her a kind of fragile peace she didn't have when she first arrived. Mia still clung to her mother's hand, sometimes sitting right at the edge of the bed, other times leaning against Nathan whenever she needed to rest, as if the two adults beside her were the last anchors left in her unsteady little world. Arya tried to sit up again, but her body was far too weak. Even the small effort left her short of breath. Nathan stepped forward immediately, his hand slipping behind her back, steadying and lifting without letting a single ounce of her weight strain her already battered strength. "Slowly," he murmured, his deep voice settling into the quiet room. "You don't have to prove anything." Arya nodded faintly, pulling in a shaky breath. I don't want Mia to worry any more than she already has." Mia looked up at her with wide, earnest eyes. "I'm not worried if Sir Nathan is here," she said, completely sincere. And Arya froze just a little, her gaze shifting to Nathan with something complex gratitude, disbelief, and a trembling softness she was not used to allowing herself. Nathan straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets as if to mask the subtle stir of emotion tightening in his chest. "I told you," he said, looking at Arya though his hand instinctively rested on Mia's head. "I'll take care of both of you until you're strong enough." Arya wanted to argue, to insist she needed no one, to keep that practiced distance she had relied on for so many years, but exhaustion made her lips tremble. And when she looked down at Mia, her daughter clinging to a complete stranger as if he were safety itself, Arya knew she no longer had the right to refuse help. Her own body had abandoned her, but Mia could not be abandoned a second time. A doctor walked in holding a clipboard with the test results and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Your condition is much more stable," he said, "but you need several days of rest. We can't discharge you today." Arya let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. "I understand. I'll stay." Nathan glanced at the doctor. "Is there anything we should be worried about?" "No," the doctor replied with a gentle shake of his head. "But severe exhaustion doesn't resolve in a few hours. She's dealing with prolonged sleeplessness, dehydration, and heavy stress. It's clear she has been living in fear and strain for a long time." Arya lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening around the blanket. The words stripped bare the parts of her life she tried hardest to hide. The months of running, the nights spent awake and terrified, the skipped meals, the endless effort to smile for Mia when she barely had the strength to stand. When the doctor left, Nathan pulled up a chair beside the bed, his eyes never leaving her face. "What happened to you?" Arya tensed, her hands balling in her lap, as if he had touched a wound still raw beneath the skin. She began, but her voice thinned out. Mia looked at her, mother, then at Nathan, waiting, wondering if he would still stay once the worst truths were spoken aloud. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his tone steady and controlled. "You don't need to tell me if you're not ready. I'm asking because I need to know the best way to protect you and your daughter." The word protect lifted Arya's gaze. It had been so long since anyone spoke to her in that tone, a tone without pity, without pressure, yet strong enough to make her feel, for a moment, safe. A long silence stretched before Arya finally lowered her eyes, her small shoulders trembling. "We left our old city because we had nowhere left to stay," she said slowly. "It wasn't safe there anymore. I thought if we could just get far enough, things might be different. But my strength gave out before I could find anywhere to stop." Mia leaned her head against Arya's arm, her voice tiny but fierce. "I only need Mom. I don't need a house. I don't need anyone. I just need Mom to wake up." Arya trembled, tears gathering at her lashes, though she fought them back for Mia's sake. Nathan watched them both for a long moment before he spoke again. "From today onward," he said, and the low, unwavering tone felt like a vow echoing through the room. "You don't have to run anymore." Arya lifted her head, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Nathan replied, his gaze sinking straight through the fear she'd been carrying for years. "I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you. Not now. Not ever." And in the moment Arya met his eyes, for the first time in years of running, she felt something she had lost piece by piece, the weightless, impossible sense of someone standing on her side. No conditions, no demands, no debts, just standing with her. Arya stayed silent for a long time after Nathan's words, as if each syllable needed to seep slowly into the empty, frightened corners of her mind, those corners carved by nights without sleep, days without direction, and the constant dread of what might happen next. Mia was still nestled close, her tiny fingers laced through Arya's while her other hand clung to Nathan's shirt, as if his presence alone could calm every storm. Nathan shifted, sitting straighter, his eyes sharp but not cold, the eyes of a man who had known danger intimately, yet today found himself facing two people who made him want to push the entire world aside. "You don't have to give me details," he said quietly, "but I need to know if someone is looking for you. Is there anyone trying to hurt you?" Arya swallowed hard, her throat too dry to hide the truth. She glanced at Mia, then back at Nathan, weighing whether she had the right to open this door to him. "No one is chasing us," she said, her voice trembling. "Not like that. We just had nowhere left to go." Nathan tilted his head slightly, studying her carefully. "You left home?" "Yes." Arya leaned, back against the bed frame, even that small movement tiring her. "After I lost my job, I couldn't pay rent. The landlord wanted us out immediately. I tried finding someplace else, but everywhere required documents I no longer had. In the end, Mia and I put everything we owned into a single suitcase and took buses from state to state. I thought maybe in a bigger city I could find temporary work. But I didn't expect my body to give out." Nathan's jaw tightened, the subtle clench he fell into whenever he heard something that angered him, not in the way violence once had, but in a way that struck deeper. A woman trying to keep her child safe shouldn't have ended up collapsing in the middle of an airport. "You should have told someone," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You can't drag a child across the map based only on hope." Arya lowered her head, fingers gripping the blanket. "I had no one to tell. My parents are gone. I'm not in contact with my siblings. And I didn't want Mia ending up in a shelter or a foster center. I just wanted to keep her with me." Nathan drew in a long breath. He wasn't a man given to softness, nor one easily swayed by emotion, yet that confession made something in his chest twist painfully. Mia, seated between them, looked up at him with solemn, almost unchildlike understanding. "Sir," she whispered, "I don't want to be away from Mom. If they sent me somewhere else, I'd run back to her." Nathan placed a steady hand on her head. "No one is taking you anywhere," he said, meeting Arya's eyes over Mia's curls. "No one." Silence settled thick, heavy, broken only by the monitored beep of Arya's heartbeat. Then Arya lifted her gaze again, her voice rough but steady. "You don't owe us anything," she said. "You don't have to stay. You have your own life." Nathan let out a quiet laugh, soft, but with a weight heavier than the words themselves. "My life." He paused, looking down at the small hand resting on his. "Doesn't have much in it that could be called responsibility. But last night, when this little girl ran to me and cried for help, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had before." Arya stared at him, shaken, confused, and deeply moved. "What does that mean?" "It means," Nathan said, his voice low and solid as iron, "I'm here because I want to make sure you and Mia have somewhere to land when you leave this hospital." Arya opened her mouth to protest, but Mia was quicker, throwing her arms around Nathan's arm with a pure, instinctive trust that made Arya's chest tighten. Nathan held Arya's gaze over Mia's small head. "When you're stronger, I'll arrange a safe place for you both. Not a shelter, not a temporary facility. A real place, with a bed, with a kitchen, with a door that locks. And with the quiet you've needed for a long time." Arya blinked, her surprise raw and unhidden. "But why would you do that? You don't even know who we are." "Maybe because," Nathan answered, and something deep inside him opened in that moment, something he rarely let anyone see. "I know what it feels like to grow up without a place to go home to." Arya held Mia closer, her heart folding inward and aching. And in that moment she understood. Nathan didn't help them out of coincidence or obligation. He helped because he recognized something in them, something he had lost, or something he never had. And that realization made the space between them shrink in a way both dangerous and profoundly gentle, leaving Arya too tired and too moved to rebuild the walls around her. She simply let out a long, fragile breath and nodded, the first acceptance she had offered anyone in many months. Mia laid her head on her mother's shoulder, then turned to Nathan with a small, hopeful smile. And Nathan, perhaps for the first time in years, felt his mind anchored fully, unmistakably, in this small hospital room, with these two strangers who had shifted the trajectory of his life without even trying. Arya sat quietly after agreeing to let Nathan help, as if the simple act of saying those words had drained the last bit of strength she had left. Mia nestled close to her, her eyes still puffy but brighter than the night before, while Nathan sat beside the bed without saying anything further, his presence alone filling the small room with a little more warmth than it had before. None of them knew exactly what was supposed to happen next. All they knew was that this moment, the first sense of safety in many long, unraveling months, felt like something fragile they didn't dare to disturb. Arya looked at Nathan, her eyes lingering on the sharp lines of his face, the expression of a man not easily bent or broken. Yet the way he looked at Mia made Arya want to trust him, something she no longer offered freely to anyone. "Do you really not have anything else to do?" Arya asked softly, her voice carrying a hint of embarrassment. "A man with a busy life wouldn't spend 2 whole days sitting with a stranger like me." Nathan leaned back slightly, his expression steady. "Busy, yes," he said. "But nothing is more important than making sure the two of you are still breathing." Arya lowered her gaze, pressing her lips together as if trying to hold down the swell of emotion inside her. Those words didn't just tell her someone was on her side. They tugged awake, a warmth she had forgotten existed, the feeling of being protected. Mia lifted her head. "Sir Nathan is right, Mama," she whispered. If he wasn't here, I'd be so scared. And in that exact moment, Nathan realized that those words from a 6-year-old who had lived through a nightmare held more weight than any promise he had ever made. There was no turning back for him now. A soft knock sounded at the door, and a nurse stepped inside carrying a small bag they had found in Arya's suitcase. When she was admitted, "We checked everything to document personal belongings," she explained. "There's no identification, but there are some clothes and a notebook." Arya took the bag, gently pulling out the small, worn notebook, its corners creased, its cover marked with her own handwriting thin, precise strokes. Mia let out a small, delighted gasp. "Mama's notebook." Arya opened a few pages, revealing lines that chronicled their wandering months, nights sleeping at bus stations, attempts to find temporary work, rejections, and then empty pages where exhaustion had stolen even her ability to write. Nathan caught sight of a few lines, and his expression darkened almost instantly. He didn't comment. Instead, he asked a quiet question that carried the weight of someone barely holding back his own reaction. "How long have you lived like this?" Arya closed the notebook, her hands shaking. "Longer than I want to remember," she whispered, "but I did everything just to keep Mia with me." Mia didn't understand all of it, but she squeezed her mother's hand with all her small strength, as if to say that every sacrifice, no matter how brutal, had meant something. Nathan rose to his feet and stepped closer, his voice lowering into something deep and unwavering. "Arya, listen to me." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his steady gaze. "From today on, the two of you don't have to wander anymore. I'll cover housing, food, and everything else you need until you can stand on your own again." Arya parted her lips, but Nathan continued before she could protest. "Not out of pity. Because no one deserves to live like that. And because I want to." Mia looked between him and her mother, whispering, "Mama, Sir Nathan wants to help us. Please don't say no." Arya exhaled a trembling sigh, her eyes shimmering but still holding on to their quiet strength. "All right," she said softly but firmly. "We'll accept your help, but only for a little while." Nathan smiled faintly, hard to say whether from relief or something deeper. "For a little while is enough," he replied. "As long as you're both safe." And in that moment, Arya understood that a little while could very well stretch far longer than she had imagined. That afternoon, when Arya had regained enough strength to sit up and take a few careful steps around the room without support, Nathan stood near the window, quietly watching as if assessing whether she was truly recovering. Sunlight spilled through the glass, settling over Arya's soft brown hair, making her look like a still-life painting he didn't dare touch too abruptly for fear of disturbing her fragile calm. Mia was curled up asleep on the long bench beside the bed, clutching the stuffed bear Nathan had bought her that morning. Arya turned and caught Nathan watching her. "You don't need to stay here all day," she said gently, though with a hint of firmness. "I'm getting better." Nathan walked closer, his eyes calm but carrying something deeper beneath the surface. "I know, but I'm not here just because you're weak. I'm here because I don't believe the two of you are safe until I understand who or what drove you to run like this." Arya froze for a heartbeat, her hands stiffening where she had been adjusting Mia's blanket. Her eyes darkened, not from fear of Nathan, but from the old terror creeping up her spine. "It's not the kind of person you're thinking of," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "No one is chasing us." Nathan crossed his arms, not pushing her but not backing away either. "Arya, you're strong. I can see that. But strength doesn't mean silence. You don't owe me the story, but I need to know what I'm protecting you from." Arya gripped the edge of the bed, her nails digging into the fabric, caught in the split second between staying silent and stepping off the cliff into the truth. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm not saying it because I don't trust you. I'm saying it because I don't want you pulled into my trouble." Nathan leaned down slightly until he was eye level with her, his tone deep but unexpectedly gentle. "Arya, I've been in the middle of worse trouble than you think. I don't frighten easily." The quiet that followed stretched out like a taut string between them before Arya finally let out a soft, resigned breath, as if setting down the armor she had worn for far too long. "I used to work at a small clinic in Nevada," she began, each word opening an old wound. "My husband, David, he was violent but very good at hiding it. No one believed me when I tried to speak up, and when I asked for a protective order, he beat me so badly I almost died. I took Mia and ran in the middle of the night. Since then, we've gone from state to state." Nathan listened with a steadiness that held no pity, only focus, and a slow, simmering fury. "Does he know where you are now?" Arya shook her head. "No. I changed my name, my number. I stopped using my bank account. But he has money, connections. I can't be sure we're completely free." Nathan straightened, his broad shoulders seeming to fill the room. "Arya, hear me." She looked up, and their eyes locked. "If he comes anywhere near you or Mia, he'll deal with me first." Before she could protest, Nathan placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding her. "I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm saying it as a promise." Something in the weight of his voice, firm, deep, and strangely warm, made Arya feel her entire body loosen, as if for the first time in years she wasn't fighting the world alone. The door opened softly, and Mia rubbed her eyes, shuffling toward the bed. "Mama," she murmured, then turned to Nathan, eyes shimmering. "Sir Nathan, will you have dinner with me?" The question made both adults still, for a moment before Nathan smiled a rare, softened expression that changed his whole face. "If your mother agrees," he said gently, "I'll stay." Arya looked from Mia to Nathan, and for the first time since meeting him, she nodded without hesitation. And in that small gesture, though none of them said it aloud, all three understood that the line between gratitude and connection had already begun to blur. The simple hospital dinner that arrived that evening wasn't good food by any measure, but for Arya and Mia, it was the first warm meal they had shared with someone else in many long, unstable months. Nathan sat at the edge of the small table near the window, placing Mia between himself and Arya, as if that natural arrangement had existed for far longer than just a day. Mia told Nathan about her new stuffed bear, about the drawings she loved, and Nathan listened with quiet attention, occasionally asking small questions that made the little girl giggle. Arya watched them, a blend of sadness and gratitude spreading through her chest. She had never seen anyone other than herself make Mia feel this safe, especially not a man. Nathan glanced at Arya once, his eyes neither intrusive nor intense, simply gentle as if silently asking whether she was all right, and that very softness unsettled her more than she expected. When the meal ended, Mia leaned her head against her mother's arm, sleepy but stubbornly keeping her eyes open, just to hear Nathan finish the story about how he had unknowingly sheltered a stray cat in his garage for 2 weeks. Arya stroked her daughter's hair, telling her softly that it was time for bed. Only after Mia sank into sleep did Arya quietly step into the hallway with Nathan. The night air drifted toward them, cool enough that Arya instinctively folded her arms, a subtle shiver coursing through her. Nathan noticed, and slid his jacket over her shoulders without waiting for permission. "You don't have to do that," Arya murmured. "I'm doing it because I want to," he replied, his voice firm but not forceful. They walked slowly down the corridor, Nathan's footsteps steady and rhythmic, while Arya stayed silent, trying to organize her thoughts. Nathan broke the silence first, holding out a thin file. "I've handled the discharge papers," he said, his voice low and businesslike. "And I've secured a location. It's private, off the grid, and has full security." He handed her a key card, his eyes scanning the hallway instinctively for any threats. "You don't have to think about logistics, Arya. You just need to focus on getting Mia ready to move." Arya held the key card, the cold plastic grounding her. She saw the fatigue in his eyes he hadn't slept, and realized he had spent the last hour securing their safety while she rested. The words, "thank you," felt too small, so she remained silent, letting her relief show in the way her shoulders finally relaxed. Arya didn't expect those words to stop her heartbeat for a moment, but they did. She had trained herself for years not to believe in kindness, but Nathan was different. He spoke little, acted much, and never asked for anything in return. She lowered her head, her voice so soft it was nearly a whisper. "I'm afraid of losing everything again." Nathan stepped closer, just one step, enough for his warmth to reach her. "Then let me hold up the part you're afraid of," he said. "Just for a while, until you feel steady again." Arya lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering but no longer avoiding his. "Nathan." He didn't reach for her, didn't rush her. He just stood there, a quiet place to lean against something she had never known before. And in that still moment, Arya felt the line between strangers and something deeper begin to blur, even though she wasn't ready to name it. but she didn't push him away anymore. And for Nathan, that was enough. The next morning, when Arya woke, sunlight filtered across the white sheets, filling the room with a strange, peaceful calm. Mia was still sound asleep, her small arms wrapped tightly around the stuffed bear. Arya glanced at her daughter, then at the chair near the door where Nathan's jacket lay neatly folded. The quiet trace of a man who had stepped into their lives in a way she never expected, and the first man to make her heart stumble in many years. When Arya stepped into the hallway, Nathan was already there. He leaned casually against the wall, a cup of coffee in hand, as if he had been waiting for her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice low but gentle. Arya nodded, though her heartbeat picked up speed in a way she couldn't control. "It was fine," she answered. Nathan extended a second cup toward her. "I figured you'd need this." Arya accepted it, surprised he remembered. Yesterday, it had been nothing more than an offhand remark that she always needed coffee to start her mornings, yet he remembered. And he cared. The warmth from the paper cup seemed to seep directly into her chest, and Arya turned away slightly, hoping to hide the strange flutter that rose inside her. "Nathan, about what you said last night." Before she could finish, Nathan took a step closer, close enough that his breath touched the small space between them. "I know," he said softly. "And I don't regret it." Arya tightened her hold on the cup. "Nathan, I've been through so much. I don't know if I have the strength to think about anything beyond keeping Mia safe." "I know," Nathan replied. "I'm not asking for an answer. I'm not asking for anything, Arya. Just let me stay by your side." Arya looked at him, her eyes bright in the morning light. "You're putting yourself in danger for something you don't have to carry." Nathan let out a faint smile, a rare one that softened the hard edges of his face. "Trust me, I've lived with danger long before you knew who I was. But this time, I have a reason to stay." A warm pulse traveled down Arya's spine. She hadn't yet found the words to respond when a small sound from inside the room made them both turn. Mia peeked out, her hair messy, eyes still drowsy. "Mama, Sir Nathan." She rubbed her eyes and smiled when she saw them standing together. "You really are here." Nathan bent down, opening his arms. Mia ran straight into them as if she had done it 100 times, not just a few days. Arya watched the scene, her heart softening with a mix of fear and gratitude she couldn't untangle. After speaking with the doctor, Arya was told she could be discharged later that day. Although it was good news, her heart tightened. Leaving the hospital meant returning to reality, to the fear waiting outside. Nathan seemed to read her thoughts. He stepped closer and placed a car key in her hand. "We're moving to a safe place. Don't worry about the cost or anything else. I've taken care of it." Arya clutched the key, looking up at him with confusion and a natural resistance that rose like instinct. "Nathan, I can't accept more from you. I don't want to owe you anything, Arya," Nathan said softly but with weight. "If there's anything I'd want you to owe me, it's just a chance for you and Mia to start again." Arya's heart stumbled once more. "You're making this harder for me," she whispered. Nathan stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of gentleness and a quiet force that slipped past every last wall she had left. "Not harder," he said, "just real." The words left Arya standing still for a moment, as if she no longer had strength to hide what she felt. At last, she let out a slow breath and nodded. "So where are you taking us?" Nathan's smile was slight, not triumphant but relieved. "Somewhere small, safe, and off the map. A place where no one knows who you are. Just somewhere for you to rest, and for me to see if I can make your life a little less heavy." Mia rushed out, grabbing her mother's hand and Nathan's hand at the same time. "We can go anywhere," she said brightly, "as long as Sir Nathan comes too." Arya looked at the two of them, and for the first time she no longer felt like she was fighting alone. She still didn't dare name the fragile emotion beginning to grow between her and Nathan. But she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came next, she wouldn't be walking into it alone. And perhaps it was finally time to let herself trust someone other than herself. The late afternoon sky was washed in a soft gray as Nathan drove Arya and Mia away from the hospital. The SUV moved quietly along the suburban road, passing rows of autumn trees whose leaves were beginning to surrender to the season. Arya sat in the back seat beside Mia, her hand instinctively gripping the strap of her bag as if letting go for even a second would cause everything to slip out of her grasp. "Nathan," checked the rearview mirror more times than usual, not to watch the road, but to make sure Arya wasn't too tense. "The place we're going to is a small apartment, but it has everything you need," he said, his voice steady and low. "Good security, full camera coverage. The neighbors mind their own business. You'll be safe." Arya nodded faintly, though unease still tightened her chest. Safe. That word no longer meant certainty to her. It meant the brief pause between storms. Mia, however, was bubbling with excitement, as if this were some grand adventure. "Sir Nathan, does the new house have a place for me to draw?" Nathan smiled. "It has your own drawing table." Mia let out a delighted little laugh, and Arya couldn't help but smile despite the weight inside her. The apartment was in a red brick building in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of the city. When the door opened, Arya froze for a moment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was tidy, warm, lived in enough to feel real. A cream sofa, a clean little kitchen, 2 bedrooms with windows facing a park. Nathan hadn't just picked a place to stay. He had chosen a place where they could begin again. Nathan set their bags down and stepped back, giving Arya room to breathe. She walked slowly, her fingers brushing the table, the wall touching things as if to confirm they wouldn't disappear if she blinked. "If you don't like it, I'll find another place," Nathan said, his voice more cautious than usual. Arya turned to him, her eyes softer. "No, this is good. Better than anything I dared imagine." Nathan opened his mouth to say something else, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed in an instant. The gentle calm he carried around her and Mia vanished, replaced by the sharp, cold resolve of a man who had faced danger long before today. "Excuse me, I have to take this," he said, stepping out onto the balcony. Arya watched him through the small gap in the door. His voice was low but tight, not the tone he used with her. "Why today? Who passed that information along?" A pause. "No, I'm not going there. And don't let anyone know where I am." Arya felt her heartbeat stutter. She didn't know who Nathan was outside the short days he'd been with them, but one thing was clear. The man on the balcony was not just a businessman, and whatever life he came from, it had teeth. He returned several minutes later, his face calm, but his eyes no longer fully still. Mia had run off to explore her new room, leaving only Arya in the living room, watching him. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. Nathan was silent for a beat before answering with a carefully chosen truth. "Just some things I need to deal with. Old things, but nothing that touches you or Mia." Arya didn't reply, but Nathan saw the flicker of worry cross her eyes. He stepped closer. "Arya, listen, whatever this is. You two are safe here. I won't let anything touch this place." "You're in danger, aren't you?" Arya asked direct. For the first time, Nathan held her gaze. "I'm always in danger." The answer chilled her. She took a small step back, not out of fear of him, but fear of whatever followed him. Nathan saw it instantly, and his voice softened. "But Arya, understand this. I've never brought anyone into my life before. I won't let anything I'm facing come near you or your daughter." Arya dropped her eyes, her fingers curling into the hem of her shirt. She was caught between trust growing too fast and a survival instinct carved deep into her bones. "Nathan, I've been running my whole life. I can't run anymore." Nathan stepped closer, slow and careful, as if approaching something fragile he didn't want to break. "Then let me stand behind you," he said, his voice like steady stone. "If someone has to face anything, it'll be me." Arya lifted her eyes, her lashes trembling. "Why are you doing all this?" He was still for several seconds. Then he spoke softly, like the first cracks in armor he'd worn for years. "Because I don't want to lose you." Arya froze. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. And Nathan knew then. What was forming between them was no longer kindness or responsibility. It had grown far past that. But at that exact moment, in a dark car parked on the street below, another man leaned forward, staring up at their windows. A silver ring on his finger gleamed under the muted light. "David." Arya's breath faltered upstairs. She approached the window out of habit, and in a fleeting second, she felt it. That old, suffocating sense of being watched. She stepped back at once. Her hands shook. The past was no longer behind her. It had found her again. Nathan moved instantly, stepping in front of her like a shield. "What did you see?" he asked. Arya shook her head, though fear trembled in her eyes. I think someone was down there. Nathan closed the curtains and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. I'll check. Arya grabbed his wrist, her voice cracking. Nathan, if it's him, if it's David, I don't know what he'll do. He won't stop. He wants me back. He wants Mia. Nathan froze for a second. Because he didn't just hear fear, he heard years of it. Of broken nights and locked doors. Of a woman who had learned to breathe quietly to stay alive. He cupped Arya's cheek, gently forcing her to look at him. Arya, you aren't facing him alone anymore. If he comes anywhere near you or Mia, he goes through me first. Arya trembled, but for the first time, fear in her eyes mixed with something else, fragile trust. Nathan left the apartment, closing the door quietly so Mia wouldn't wake. He descended the stairs like a shadow, his presence shifting into something sharp and dangerous, nothing like the softness Arya had seen in him. When he reached the street, the car was gone. No license plate, no trace, a clean disappearance. Nathan's jaw tightened. This wasn't someone passing by. This was someone watching, someone hunting. He returned upstairs. Arya stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, as if holding her own breaking pieces together. When Nathan entered, her gaze locked onto him, desperate for an answer. No one's there, Nathan said softly. But I don't like how fast the car disappeared. Arya exhaled shakily, but her legs were still trembling. Nathan, I can't let him take Mia. I can't. Nathan placed a hand on her back, light, steady, anchoring. Listen to me. If he really is here, I'll know. I've had someone watching this area since yesterday. I'm not letting anyone get close to you. Arya looked up, tears forming but her voice steadier. Do you think he found us? It's possible, Nathan said truthfully. He didn't believe in lies that broke later. But that only means one thing: we prepare. We don't run. Arya stared at him for a long time, as if trying to borrow his steadiness to calm the storm inside her. Just then, Mia appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, unaware that danger had brushed past their home minutes earlier. Mommy, I'm hungry. Arya wiped her tears quickly and smiled, fragile, trembling. Nathan's chest tightened at the sight. I'll make something, he said, already moving toward the kitchen like he'd done it 1,000 times. As he cooked, Arya leaned against the counter, watching him. Nathan, she whispered. He turned. Yes? I don't want you pulled into this. You don't owe me anything. Nathan set the knife down, his eyes deep and steady. Arya, I'm not doing this out of debt. I'm doing this because I want to protect the people He paused, but his eyes spoke for him. Arya felt her heart tighten painfully. She turned away, trying to hide the softness creeping into her. If he truly is here, are you sure you want to stay involved? Nathan moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Arya, I'm not stepping back. Not because of him, not because of danger, and certainly not because of fear. He leaned in slightly, voice low and steady, almost like a vow. I'm not leaving you, either of you. Just then, a vibration buzzed across the kitchen counter. Nathan checked the screen. His expression hardened at once. A message. 4 words. He's been asking around. Nathan inhaled slowly, then lifted his eyes to Arya. She didn't know what the message said, but in that moment, something between them shifted. This was no longer kindness or coincidence. This was a bond formed under the shadow of a mutual threat, and the door to the coming conflict had just opened all the way. Nathan stared at the brief message on his phone, his jaw tightening until the muscles on both sides of his temples stood out sharply. Arya stood a few steps away, watching him closely, trying to read something in his expression, but his face was locked down like a steel door with no key. Nathan? She asked, her voice small and trembling. He looked up then, and his eyes softened the moment they met hers, as if Arya alone could pull him out of whatever shadows were crowding his thoughts. It's nothing, he said, though his voice had dropped a shade lower, the kind of tone that betrayed something far more serious. I just need to go outside and make a call. Can't you tell me what's going on? Arya stepped closer, her fingers twisting together. Nathan, if this has anything to do with me, I need to know. Nathan looked at her, long and deep, until her breath nearly stopped. Finally, he reached out and touched her arm, gentle but steady, as if grounding her. I'll tell you, he murmured, just not in front of Mia. They both glanced toward the bedroom, where Mia sat on the floor arranging little plastic blocks Nathan had bought her. Her face was bright and carefree, utterly unaware that the world outside was beginning to tilt once again. Nathan led Arya out onto the balcony. The late-day wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of dry leaves and the cool dampness drifting from the park nearby. He stood close to the railing, leaning forward with both hands braced against the metal edge. Arya stood beside him, her chest tightening. "What did the message say?" she whispered. Nathan drew in a slow breath before answering honestly, without trying to soften it. "One of my men said someone's been asking about the address of this apartment, not directly through a chain of contacts around this area. And the way those questions were asked." He lifted his gaze, his eyes sharp as if they'd touched a blade. "It sounds like David." Arya felt the blood drain from her face. Her whole body trembled instantly, as if she'd been thrown back into the darkest days of her life. Her hand gripped the railing, desperate to keep herself upright. "No, he can't. He doesn't know we're here." "Arya," Nathan said, his voice deep but unwavering, "don't underestimate obsessive men. He's been looking for you for a long time. If he knows you're alive still running, he won't stop." Arya shut her eyes, her breath breaking unevenly. "Nathan, if he comes here, Mia." Nathan turned to her immediately, his hands finding her shoulders, firm but not harsh. "Arya, listen to me," he said, his voice edged with command yet softened by something meant only for her. "He hasn't found you. I've had every road around this area checked. I've got cameras around the building, private security, men watching overnight. He won't get near Mia. But if he... Arya..." Nathan lowered his head until their eyes were level. "I've gone up against men far worse than him. David only has power when you're afraid of him. But he's not stronger than I am. Not in this fight." Arya opened her eyes and looked directly at him. They were filled with tears, but also with a fragile kind of trust she hadn't realized still existed inside her. "Nathan, you're protecting me. Protecting Mia. You don't have to do that." "I do," Nathan said softly, with a resolve that left no room for doubt. "Because I've chosen to stand with you. And I don't take back my choices." Something in Arya's chest throbbed painfully, not from fear but from the realization that she had leaned on him more than she'd allowed herself to admit. "Nathan, I don't want to drag you into danger. I've already destroyed my life. I don't want to destroy yours. Arya, I lived with danger long before you came into it. You haven't destroyed anything." Nathan lifted his hand to her cheek, brushing lightly against her skin, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. "You've given my life a reason." The words stole the air from Arya's lungs. She turned her head, unable to hide her tears. But before she could speak, a small sound came from behind them. Mia stood at the balcony door, hugging her stuffed bear, her wide eyes blinking at the sight of the two adults. "Mom, Sir Nathan, what's wrong?" Arya wiped her tears quickly. Nathan's entire expression shifted as he walked over to her, lifting her into his arms with effortless gentleness. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," he said softly. "We were just talking." Mia rested her head on his shoulder, completely trusting him. "Mommy, don't be sad anymore," she whispered, reaching her small hand out to hold Arya's. "Sir Nathan will protect you." Arya looked at the two of them, the hard man holding a child with the ease and tenderness of a father, and the little girl trusting him without hesitation, and she understood something with painful clarity. If David truly found them, she would not be facing him alone. But she also understood something else. The storm coming toward them was real, and it wasn't just aimed at her. It was aimed at the very man standing between her small family and the world. Nathan set Mia down on the sofa, then looked at Arya for a long moment, as if making sure she was still steady. His eyes held one message. No matter how close their enemy got, he would never let him touch this fragile new family. But outside the glass door, a shadow slipped past the building, a silent reminder that the hours of safety they had left were beginning to run out. That night, the small apartment lay under a suffocating kind of stillness. Nathan activated every security system around the building, checked the locks 3 times, and scanned each corner of the camera feeds like a hunting animal sensing danger closing in. Arya stood in the doorway of Mia's room, watching him quietly. When Nathan returned to the hallway, their eyes met. Neither spoke, but both understood a storm was drawing near. Nathan walked toward her, his voice low and steady. "From now on, don't let Mia go outside unless I'm with her. Keep the windows locked. If you see anyone unfamiliar, call me immediately. Arya nodded, her fingers tightening. Nathan, I'm sorry. If David has found this place, I've dragged you into all of this. Nathan stepped closer, placing his hand lightly on her cheek. Arya, I'm not dragged in. I walked in. Arya bit her lip, tears rising. I don't know what I'd do if he took Mia. Nathan pulled her into his chest immediately, holding her with a protective firmness. No one is taking her, not as long as I'm here. But that moment of fragile peace shattered when the doorbell rang sharply through the quiet night. Both Arya and Nathan froze. Mia stirred inside the bedroom and called softly, Mommy? Nathan raised his hand in warning, signaling absolute silence. With a fluid motion, he killed the lights in the living room and moved to the door with the precision of someone who had encountered danger far too many times. He peered through the peephole. A man stood on the other side, not David, but a hired surveillance type in a dark coat. The man didn't knock again. He simply bent down, slid a business card under the door, and walked away with a casual stride. When the shadow disappeared, Nathan picked up the card. No name, no phone number. Just a single cold sentence. I know she's alive. Arya saw the card in Nathan's hand and gasped, her body seizing with panic. She moved to rush forward, but Nathan intercepted her, his arm gently pushing her back toward the bedroom. Is it him? Arya whispered, her voice trembling. No, Nathan replied, his eyes dark. But it's a warning. They're probing. Arya covered her mouth, trying to swallow a sob. Nathan checked the safety on the weapon he had concealed, his posture shifting from gentle guardian to cold soldier. Go inside with Mia. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat on the sofa with eyes locked on the glowing screens. Inside the bedroom, Arya lay awake holding Mia, staring into the darkness, knowing that the only thing standing between her and her past was the man sitting just outside her door. The next morning, the tension in the apartment was palpable. Nathan had barely stepped away from the window when his phone buzzed. It was a message from his team, followed by a photo. David was nearby. Nathan looked out the window. A black car was parked beneath the building like a long, stretching shadow. Even from this distance, the intent was clear. He's here, Nathan said, his voice forged from cold steel. Arya rushed to the window, peering through the crack in the curtains. Nathan, does he know? He suspects, and he's testing us. Nathan turned to her, his gaze sharp. I'm going down there. No. Arya grabbed his arm, panic flaring. If he sees you, if he senses anything, he could hurt you. David is dangerous. Nathan placed both hands on her shoulders, grounding her. Arya, I need to make him believe this place is meaningless. If I hide, he'll know you're here. If I face him, I can turn him away. He turned to Mia, who was watching with wide, worried eyes. Nathan knelt, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Stay with your mom. I'll be right back. Nathan stepped into the hallway, and Arya locked the door behind him, pressing her forehead against the wood, praying. Nathan descended the stairwell, every step shedding the softness he reserved for them. When he walked outside, the wind hit his face. David was leaning against his car, eyes scanning the building. Nathan stepped into the street, tall and unyielding. David looked up, narrowing his eyes. Who are you? There's nothing here for you, Nathan said, his voice flat and edged with warning. David smiled, a chilling expression. I heard there's a woman here, a woman I know. I came to bring her home. There's no one here for you to take. David stepped closer, his arrogance flaring. You sure you want to involve yourself in this? Nathan moved forward, closing the distance, a wall of flesh and will. I'm sure. And if you come back here again... He stopped, his voice dropping into a lethal register. You won't be leaving. David stared at him for a long moment, measuring the threat. He saw the confidence in Nathan's stance, the look of a man who controlled violence rather than feared it. Realizing he was outmatched for the moment, David huffed a laugh and stepped back. She's mine, David spat. She was never yours, Nathan replied. David got into his car and sped off. Nathan watched until the car disappeared. He knew David wasn't gone forever, but he had bought them time and he had drawn the line in the sand. When Nathan came back upstairs, Arya opened the door instantly. Seeing him safe, She collapsed against him, sobbing in relief. Nathan held her tightly, looking over her head at the empty street below. He had won the first battle. Arya still trembled slightly in his arms, her breath uneven as though she could no longer control it after standing so close to danger. Nathan held her tightly, his hand moving slowly up and down her back as if trying to warm every fear out of her. "Are you really all right?" Arya asked, her voice catching as her forehead rested against his chest. Nathan nodded, lifting her chin gently so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "I'm fine. He won't act until he knows what he's up against." Arya searched his gaze and saw all of it, the anger he held down, the fragile relief that she and Mia were safe. "Nathan, if he comes back?" "He will," Nathan said without hesitation, though his eyes softened when he saw her face go pale. "But next time, I won't give him a chance to get close." Arya swallowed, placing her hand instinctively against his chest, as if grounding herself in the steady beat beneath her palm, the one thing that made her believe she still had some measure of control. "I don't want you in danger because of us." "Arya," Nathan replied, his voice a low, unwavering promise. "I've been in danger long before you came into my life. But for the first time, I have a reason to survive it." The words caught in Arya's throat, filling her eyes with unspoken emotion. Nathan pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers, not a gesture of rushed passion, but something deeper, a connection forged through shared wounds and a desperate need for refuge. "Nathan," she breathed, not even knowing what she meant to say, only sensing that in this moment, he wasn't just a protector but the only place she felt truly safe. A soft sound in the room made them pull apart. Mia stepped out, hugging her stuffed bear, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Mom? Uncle Nathan?" she whispered. Nathan immediately softened, bending down to lift her into his arms. "It's all right, sweetheart," he murmured. "I just went to talk to someone." Mia looked at him with pure trust. "You'll come back again, right?" Nathan smiled gently and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I always come back." Watching them, Arya's heart tightened with fear and warmth all at once. She knew Mia had begun to see Nathan as family, and she herself had begun to depend on him in ways she was afraid to admit. After Mia fell asleep again, Arya and Nathan sat side by side in the warm glow of the living room lamp. The soft light made the space feel strangely peaceful, a small pocket of calm inside the storm gathering outside. "Nathan," Arya said, her voice quiet but honest. "I'm not just afraid of David. I'm afraid of losing you." Nathan turned to her, his gaze deeper and more serious than she had ever seen. "Arya, I'm not going anywhere. But if he does something—" Nathan placed his hand over hers, giving it a steady squeeze. "I've spent my whole life preparing for the worst. But this time, I'm preparing to live, not to die, because of you two." Arya felt every word sink into her like a heavy, comforting weight. "I don't deserve that," she whispered. "No one has ever protected me the way you do." "It's not about deserving," Nathan said, brushing his fingers along her cheek. "I'm doing this because I want to, because I—" He paused, as if fighting the urge to step back, to protect himself, but in the end, he chose the truth. "Because I care about you more than I ever expected." Arya's breath halted. She looked at him for a long moment, and instead of pulling away the way she once did, she let her head rest gently on his shoulder. Nathan wrapped his arm around her, drawing her close to his chest, where his heartbeat thudded strong and certain in the quiet room. They stayed like that for a long time, without speaking, only warmth between them, Arya's faint tremble as she found her first real refuge in years, and Nathan's steady hold like an unspoken vow. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, whispering of the danger creeping closer than ever. But in Nathan's arms, Arya knew one truth with absolute clarity. She no longer had to run alone. And if David returned, as he surely would, he would not be facing the broken woman he once destroyed. He would be facing the man willing to do anything to protect her. The man Arya was beginning to love. That morning, for the first time after days of relentless tension, the sunlight coming through the window no longer made Arya flinch. Mia slept peacefully in her room, while Arya stood leaning against the balcony railing, drawing in a long breath as if inviting peace to return to her life. Nathan stepped out behind her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, the warmth of his touch easing her body in a way she could not control. "Today will be all right," he murmured. Arya turned, her eyes softening as she fell naturally into his arms. "I couldn't sleep last night," she admitted, her voice trembling but honest. "Not because I was scared anymore, but because I realized that if one day you walked away, I wouldn't know how to face anything." Nathan studied her quietly for a long moment, then gave a faint, warm smile. "I'm not going anywhere, not when you two have become the place I want to belong." The words weren't adorned or dramatic, yet they lit a small flame of hope inside her heart. After that quiet morning, Nathan received an important message. David had left the city. His unexpected encounter with Nathan the night before had convinced him he'd mistaken the address, and Nathan's team continued monitoring him from a distance to ensure he didn't return. When Nathan shared the news, Arya sat still, her hand trembling before gradually loosening, as if letting go of a weight that had pressed on her chest for years. "So, we're safe?" she whispered. "For now," Nathan replied, taking her hand in his. "And in the coming days, I'll take care of the rest." Arya nodded softly, her eyes glistening, not with fear this time, but with relief, gratitude, and something deeper blooming quietly inside her. That afternoon, they took Mia to the park nearby. The little girl ran freely, laughter spilling from her like sunlight, her eyes glowing with a freedom Arya had never seen before. Arya sat on a wooden bench watching her daughter, emotion rising in her throat at the simple bliss of the moment. Nathan sat beside her, their hands brushing lightly beneath the soft warmth of the sky. The afternoon sun filtered through the autumn leaves, casting long, golden shadows across the grass. Mia was chasing a kite a few yards away, her laughter drifting back to them on the breeze. Nathan sat on the bench, his arm draped along the backrest, creating a shelter even here in the open. Arya watched her daughter for a moment, then slowly, tentatively, leaned her head against Nathan's shoulder. He didn't pull away. Instead, his hand moved to cover hers, his fingers lacing through hers in a firm, unbreakable grip. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun dip lower, 3 broken pieces finally fitting together to make something whole. Arya's eyes closed, a small smile forming on her lips. That single peaceful moment was enough for Nathan to know her answer was yes. Mia ran over, wrapping her little arms around both of them, her voice bright with happiness. "We're like a family." Arya and Nathan looked at each other, and this time, neither of them looked away. They both smiled, pulling the little girl close between them. In that simple moment, 3 people who had once been shattered found one another, gathering the broken pieces of their lives and forming something whole, a reminder that not all families begin with blood. Some families are born from courage, from kindness, and from love strong enough to outgrow fear. And Arya's journey reminds us that sometimes all it takes is one person reaching out at the right moment for life to shift, guiding us toward a place where the heart can heal and where peace finally finds its way home. Did this story touch you? Have you ever lived through fear, lost your trust, and then found light again through someone you never expected? Share your thoughts below, we'd love to hear your heart. If you enjoyed today's story, please subscribe, like, and share so you won't miss the moving, heartfelt, healing videos we bring every day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Wishing you health, peace, and a gentle, joyful life. See you in the next video.